happens while I erase the tape?
There you go. It's
Oh, there you
recording.
go. Maybe Bruce Campbell will suddenly pop up on the
Yeah.
background. Hey, boy, it's good to see you, man. It's been a
Good to
while.
see you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I was just thinking, Bruce Campbell sure sounded like Richard Nixon.
Yeah, no, he does. But we were, I worked with Bruce and talked to him. We didn't just want him to do a like a rich little, carbon copy of Nixon, because then you could have gotten anyone. We really wanted it to be, Bruce Campbell as Nixon, to bring that gravitas and innate sense of humor that Bruce's voice has.
Also implying that there might be horror down the line.
I suppose so. But
He was just at South by Southwest with the Evil Dead. I heard it
yeah,
was
yeah.
like raucous.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Yeah.
So your film went all over the place. I mean,
Hmm.
even on the airplanes.
Yeah, it's played on six planes, or six airlines: JetBlue, Virgin Atlantic, Singapore Air, Air New Zealand, Emirates, and Qatar. Those are the six. So and yeah, I mean, listen to other filmmakers. We made more money on the airline deal than we will on anything else put together, probably.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
I mean, it's
interesting.
still not a fortune, but it's real money.
Do they pay by the run or by the amount of flights or?
It's no, it's you get a flat fee.
Mhm.
They'll license it for, usually it's about a year, sometimes a year and a half. And it's just a flat fee. So it's not determined by number of flights or number of views or anything like that. And so yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You get paid, they put it on, and it may not run on every airplane either, or it may run in first class and not economy. Like, I was on a JetBlue flight and it wasn't on the in the cheap seats on my plane, but I know other people have seen it on there. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So and then you were at 25 film festivals, I gathered, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. So that was a lot of fun. And that was, not easy to do during COVID, or, the tail end of COVID, because a lot of festivals were still virtual. And we actually turned down a lot of virtual festivals
Mm-hmm.
because we were pretty much exclusively focused on anything that had live screenings, or at least hybrid. They were doing both. So
Mm-hmm.
we actually turned down a few, but it was, and then just kind of navigated, the trough between Delta and Omicron, and then Omicron and BA2,
Right.
because festivals were live, then they went virtual again, and live and virtual. So it was a lot of jockeying, much more than you usually have with festivals. It's like, okay, are you guys on this year? Are you not on this year? Other
Well, you
filmmakers would
finished
drop
shooting
out.
during COVID, right?
Yeah, so
I,
we started shooting in March 3rd, 2020. What could possibly go wrong? So
right.
we, um, we shot for about 11 days and had 4 days left to go, and then we had to shut down. We were one of the last films shooting in North America, and then we shut down for 6 months. And then during that 6 month period, that's actually when we recorded Bruce and John Cryer and Ted Raimi. We did it over Zoom, just like this. And we worked a lot on the music during that time. And I was editing. 80% of the film. And then we came back exactly 6 months later, September 15th or something, 2020, and shot out the last 4 days using the COVID safe protocols, masks and shields and testing and all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see you wrote a lot of the lyrics for the songs.
Yeah, yeah, I did all the lyrics to the songs, and that was a lot of fun. Then I had them, some of them I had to get translated into Portuguese. So I had a friend in Brazil who translated them, and then we found this great Brazilian singer, Caro Piroto, who lives in LA mostly, but she goes back and forth, and so she was able to and she could sing in both English and Portuguese. So it was great to work with her on those.
It was nice touch to see when at the very end that's the music that comes up on the radio.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, exactly.
it was just you know kind of folded in just the
Yeah.
way it's supposed to.
Yeah, no, exactly. We wanted, I mean, that was very intentional, that Brasilia Bella theme. We actually wrote that while we were still writing the script, really early on in the process. And it was integrated into the script that it would be the background song that she would hear. You hear it in the diner. That's the song they dance to, but with Brazilian lyrics. So if you speak English, you don't understand what the lyrics are. And then at the end, we wanted the lyrics to be in English so that the audience and Connie herself would get it. I mean, the last words you hear is she's a secret agent Cinderella.
Yeah.
And and then the credits pop in. So yeah, that was we had a lot of fun with those.
Is that another career for you coming up, writing lyrics for bands and
Well,
rock?
I not necessarily, but I wouldn't say no either. I've done I've done lyrics on songs or songwriting on almost all my films one way or another. So it's kind of a recurring thing. I mean, I'm not much of a musician per se, but especially working with Luis, my composer, who I've done the last two films with. I mean, he's a musical genius, but he's not a lyric, but he'll be the first to say he doesn't do lyrics. So we're a great combination because he can kind of come up with the melodies and say, oh, can you come up with lyrics to this? And then, a day later I'll be like, here you go. And then he makes it work. But no, it was interesting. Just 2 days ago, he called me up to say that he got a call from Netflix that they saw Brasilia Bella. They saw like our making of videos and saw the press we got on it for the Oscar thing. And they just hired him to do a Brazilian song for some Netflix show. But it doesn't have lyrics in it.
Making of videos nowadays, since DVD is,
Yeah.
it's stuff and everybody streams.
Yeah.
Where do the making ofs go?
It's on YouTube, and we put it on Instagram and all kinds of places like that. They just stumbled into it. But I'm actually, one of the things I'm doing right now is because we are doing a DVD release of the film. That's kind of coming back a little bit in a weird way. So I've been cutting the behind the scenes featurette, which is now almost 2 hours long, which is longer than the film itself.
Got to run that at Slamdance next year.
it'll be somewhere
out of competition, unless you have a competition for making of. But that might be a great competition to push the market.
No,
we're the best making of film of making films.
Mm-hmm. No, in fact, right before I jumped on with you, I was drafting an email to the DGA because we have to get it listed as its own separate film. So we have to kind of figure out how to do that so that I can actually get a directing credit for it.
How do you? Or you're still trying to figure it out?
Yeah, but I think we're on our way there. It's just a matter of
add that to your book after you figure it out.
No, exactly. Yeah, that's the next chapter. Is how do you make sure you get a directing credit on your own behind the scenes?
Yeah, that's a major thing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering this year they finally ran real festivals, and Slamdance ran, which you were like the heart of, throwing out those candies to the crowd and all that.
Yeah.
And but you weren't there because you were.
Yeah. It was, I was going to Florida to a funeral with my wife the next weekend, and I didn't want to pick up COVID or anything else because I knew I'd be around a bunch of old people the next weekend. So this was the year I felt like with Park City, if you didn't need to go, you didn't need to go, and I didn't really need to go. So, but I was there virtually. I did my poem, which they projected in the screening room. So that was nice.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So I was there in spirit as much as any other time.
I saw you got a lot of support early on from the Film Collaborative.
They were exactly. They were our fiscal sponsor. So, this is the second film I've done with them where they stepped in that regard. So they basically, they're a 501c3. So we could take donations from rich people or other people on an ongoing basis for, the couple of years we were making the film. And if people, then they keep 5%, we get the rest of the money, but the donor gets a tax deduction right away. So it's a nice option for for potential investors, if you say, well, look, you're not going to make your money back. I know that on these things. So if you want a tax deduction right away, this is a way to do it. And so it works out nicely for everyone. So we raised quite a bit of money that way.
So are you in the if you ask that old budget question, would you go under $1 million in the old way?
Oh, way under. Yeah. It's a couple 100,000. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
That's amazing production values for a
Yeah.
couple
Thanks.
100,000.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can say it now
And it
because
would
we
have been a
sold
little
it.
bit less if it weren't for COVID. Like doing that extra shoot added about 60,000 or 70,000 to it. So.
Right. And of course, when you have that kind of number, it's because a lot of people donate their services.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. If you actually added up what their services was,
Right.
then it's probably a $2 million film.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So that's something to keep in mind. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you think about the streaming end? Is that going to be part of the whole thing for you in this?
Well, I mean, not so much for me. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, yeah, everyone is talking about streaming and episodics and things like that, but I think there is still a bit of, I think, all those companies have overspent and they're cutting staff and they're cutting shows. And I think there will always be a place for 90 to 120-minute films, self-contained feature films.
Oh, I'd hate to see that go away just
Yeah,
because
exactly.
it's
Yeah,
bad
because
enough
that's the thing is,
the theaters are getting hit.
yeah, no, of course. Yeah, I mean, you can't binge a 8-episode series in a theater, and certainly not easily. And it's hard to watch them on a plane. That's actually why planes are really good for feature films as opposed to a series. You can only get, if it's a 3-hour flight, you're only watching 1 or 2 movies. You can't watch a whole season of some HBO show. But I think there's always going to be a space for features, and and that's kind of the space I'm in, I suppose.
Well, I love them the best. I mean, all the other stuff is, I don't know. I always think of that John. I don't know how accurate everything was in that book about Belushi, but I
Right.
remember him right because it was like he was a fly on the wall for like
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
I don't know how he did that, but but it was a very readable book. But he said he had a bar and like off Greenwich Village that in the bathroom there was a graffiti that said television. Uh, Movies are king. Television is furniture.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, and I think it's still kind of like that. So, but it's, the winds of time shift. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all kind of storytelling and visual filmmaking, no matter what you call it. But I think a lot of these series, people are also starting to realize like, oh, it was an 8-episode series. It probably could have been an hour and a half. I think
Yeah. I
people are
think you're
realizing
cutting yourself
these
off.
narratives are getting stretched a little too thin.
I've always felt that way. It's like, well, we got a series, so we can't give you it all. We got to hold something back.
Yeah. And I
There's
just,
something.
yeah, which is ironic that, as teenagers' attention spans are growing shorter and shorter, like why are narratives getting longer and longer? It's kind of a strange dichotomy.
That's kind of like a Zen cone or something.
Yeah, it's like we're stuck between, 15-second TikToks and an 8-hour series.
So you also had the theatrical runs. Is that
Mhm.
impacted? It was like post COVID. Well, not post COVID because COVID was still going to a certain extent.
Yeah,
How
exactly.
much do you think that impacted the results?
I think quite a bit. But on the other hand, I mean, yeah, it certainly depressed crowds, for sure. I mean, people still weren't coming back to the theaters in the way they were before. But having done theatrical releases before, it's not like they were that great before, honestly, for little indie films. If you don't have a big marketing budget, whether you're self-distributed or have a distributor, but it's a small distributor, people weren't coming before. So I don't think we did that much worse than we would have before. And the nice thing was that not as many films were in theaters.
Yeah, I
So,
got
I
that
mean,
going for
theaters
you.
were having a hard time booking or even finding films sometimes.
Hmm.
So we kind of came out. So I don't think it really hurt us that much. I mean, this was my biggest theatrical release. We did over 60 theaters. So, um,
How long did
and
that
actually,
run? About that release? A couple
it was
months.
about 7 months long.
Ah,
So, we really kind of kept milking it, and and again, I think because there were fewer movies available for theaters, that allowed us to kind of, play some of these later places.
so I saw Lloyd Kaufman in there. Good old. I didn't realize such a good actor. But it was funny because you see the scene at the very beginning, and he's leaving, and she's in, women today, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, but he's not putting his coat on. It's like half on, and he just doesn't get it on. Was that like his little stage trick? Did you know he
No,
was gonna?
I think that was actually just Lloyd not being able to put his coat on.
Well, he turned it into like it was if he had thought about. Let's see, what
Yeah,
should I
no,
do to get? You
yeah,
know,
it's funny. I should check all the other takes and see if he actually got it on. It was not really intentional, but I mean, yeah, he's not the most subtle performer. He's Lloyd. It was but it was great having him around, and I've known him for 20 years, and he's an icon. So yeah, it was when the opportunity came to put him in the movie, I was like, well, got to put in Lloyd.
well, we're talking about casting. Your lead actress was just impressive and phenomenal.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah, Willa Fitzgerald. She was the first one we met with. And then we circled around with some other people, and then we came back to her, and she was available and happy and willing to do it. And she brought her dog out to stay with her in Greenport, which was a lot of fun for all of us. And yeah, just a trooper. She was just phenomenal in the film, and could hold those long scenes. She and John Magaro could do those, like 3-4 minute oneers without any trouble, which I mean, that is not easy for any actor.
Is she getting some bites for like big roles now?
John Magaro.
Uh, uh,
Oh, Willa.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right after she did our film, she got hired to do Reacher, which was an Amazon series that was on last spring, and she was a female lead in that, and that really did that was great for her. That got a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs, and critical attention, and so she's getting a lot more parts now, for sure.
And what's cool about the film also is it's pretty evergreen. You could run this forever. It's like, you know, I
Yeah,
mean, a
that's a nice thing
period
about a
piece, but
period piece.
yeah. But listening to the things they were saying, especially with Howard Hughes getting the nuclear codes and all that, I mean, where did you come up with that?
That is real from history. That is a weird little, everything on there. I mean, there's so much speculation about what could have been on the 18.5 minute tape. There's no one's ever going to know what really was there. So there's a lot of theories about it. But one of the theories involved Howard Hughes and the yeah, and and it's this whole other weird story about what happened with this nuclear sub that went down in off the coast of Hawaii in 1968, and he worked with the CIA to dredge it up, but they didn't quite get it all, and and they didn't get the nukes. Yeah, it's a weird thing, and that may or may not have been what was related to the 18.5 minute gap. And we actually talked once we were screening the film theatrically. We met a guy in LA, but he had been an intern working for a legal intern for the Senate Watergate Committee in 1973, and his job was to listen to all the tapes. And he loved our film. He said, "Yeah, it sounded like the tapes. The Howard Hughes thing, that was as plausible as anything else, as any other theory we had." And because they were going to subpoena Hughes, and then in the end they wound up not, but they were that was definitely part of what they were looking into.
It was interesting also to see just Paul Ryan mentioned at one of his earlier jobs, leading in at the beginning, and then he was sick that day and didn't show up, so they killed the tape and left it in the tape machine, apparently, right? Is that
Yeah,
what?
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, that part is a little bit made up, but I mean, it's all based on a real thing that there were 4 or 5 different offices in the White House complex, including the old executive office building, which is right across the street, that had the tape activated taping system, or the voice activated taping system. And there really are tapes of Nixon listening to and fumbling with the buttons to a tape in a room that also has its own voice activated taping system. And once in the research, we found out that there really are some of those tapes that do exist of a tape of a tape. Then that sort of opened up the plausible possibility that there could then be someone like a Connie who gets a tape of the 18.5-minute tape. And then that opened up, and then the plot just kind of, it didn't quite
What
write
happened to
itself.
those tapes of tapes that you heard about?
What they're out there. I mean, the National Archives has them. None of much, historical consequence other than just, the concept of hearing Nixon fumbling with buttons. And the tape quality on all these tapes is really pretty poor, which is why most of them have never been transcribed, because it's really hard to hear them. The phone calls, his phones he also tapped his own phones. Those are actually really clear. Those you can hear really well. But anything with microphones is pretty hard to hear. But I don't know if you made it to the end of the end credits, but we added in a little bit where they're talking about the Hot Rock, this Robert Redford movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that we actually discovered, that was, I think, a historical discovery we made, that about 2 minutes after the 18.5-minute gap, where they're supposed to be talking about something else, which is why no one ever pays much attention to that part of the tape. They're talking about this movie, The Hot Rock, but they really are joking about how, it's a heist gone wrong, just kind of like this Watergate thing. Ah, ha, ha. And then sure enough, we checked the logs, and Nixon watched that film that weekend. So, and this is 3 days after the burglary. So it kind of shows this weird kind of self-awareness that Nixon and Haldeman had even 3 days after the burglary, that, oh man, this thing is farcical. And even we know it. Yeah.
Well, the whole thing, yeah. So the film is played a little farcical, and I
Yeah.
mean, they're very bumbling. I mean, a lot of it reminds me almost of Peter Sellers and the bomb that he had. What was it? The Mouse
Dr.
at
Strangelove.
Ward.
Oh, Master Roard. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you get that far in and be that incompetent, but right at that level.
Yeah. No, it really, and that's really what Watergate was. It's just like these bumbling idiots kind of making it up as they went along, and then digging themselves in deeper every step of the way. I mean, that's why the cover-up was worse than the crime in a lot of ways. And yeah, and people forget that when they got caught at the Watergate, that was actually the second time they went, because they had to fix the bugs from the first time because they didn't work. And that's something that came out during the hearings, actually.
So in your construction of the style of the script, and it's kind of like you emulated that kind of bumbling. I mean, like those assassins at the end, boy, they were really not very good at their job.
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah,
Curtis
and that was,
Bundy, all
that was a fun challenge to come up with those characters and figure out, like, well, how can Connie, an untrained, what civilian, ultimately defeat these two trained assassants?
too
Which
much
is why
wine probably beforehand.
yeah, too much wine, but also, she knows all the special skills that a reel-to-reel tape player can do. She knows it can be deadly in more than one way. So that's kind of what we wanted to play with a little bit there.
Well, how about what did you think of Curtis Bundy Hall in terms of working with him?
Oh, Vondi was great. I mean, he was Vondi Curtis Hall. Yeah, he's a fantastic actor, amazing guy to just hang around and be with, and incredibly supportive of the rest of the cast and crew, and just has a wealth of experience. So he was fantastic, and we only cast him about 3 days before he showed up. So it was a real last minute thing to get both him and Kathy Curtin were cast at the last minute, and they just had amazing chemistry between each other. But also, we didn't have time to rehearse then with the younger couple. And so there's a lot of the reactions of the younger couple to them as characters are what their real reactions were as actors too. Vondi and Kathy had a lot of fun kind of surprising Willa and John with what they were going to do. And we made it work, for the film, I think. But yeah. But I know I've talked to Vondi afterwards, and he said they had a lot of fun with that.
So, what are you working on now?
Well, I'm still editing the behind the scenes. That's still ongoing. And then I'm actually tomorrow I'm flying to Omaha, which is where I'm from, and we're talking to a theater company about maybe doing a theater version of 18 and a half, a stage show. So that may take up some time. But otherwise, as far as whatever the next film is, I don't know. I'm looking at a
Your,
couple
your,
different
your
projects.
first film was Omaha, was it not? It was.
Yeah, exactly. Omaha the movie. And that's actually another thing I need to do is work on that was never really very well scanned or telecine. So I want to do a 4K scan of it this year because I still have the
So,
negative sitting in my house.
who does that? Does Super 8 Films, I think, specializes in that.
Well,
They do a
they're
lot.
one place, but there's some
The
guy who works out
Vigians.
of his garage. Yeah, there's a
Oh
bunch of
yeah,
different
well,
places.
yeah, always go for the guy in the garage.
Yeah, I know.
That
I
is
know.
the slam dance approach.
Yeah. Yeah.
How much did your experience with slam dance influence the great book too? I mean, it's the first book in a while about making films. I mean,
Yeah,
every new
thanks.
generation comes along, and
Yeah.
we sort of had Lenny Lipton and Spaghetti, whatever, City, I think it was one of
Mm.
them, about learning how to make films and all
Yeah, and
the
then Rick Schmidt's how to make films and at used car prices, and you know, yeah. I mean, that's what's been great about my association with Slamdance is I meet new filmmakers every year, and figure out and find out sort of what's the hot new trends in everything from cameras to distribution to casting, and that kind of keeps me relevant and current. But I've met my last three cinematographers all came through relationships I met at Slamdance, and most of my producing partners too. So it's been great to to have. I mean, I'm not, as we know, I'm not as involved as I used to be, but enough that I can still kind of draw on those relationships and every year.
But what do you see in the younger filmmakers now? What is the new dynamic, so to speak?
Well, it is interesting because, and I do a lot of guest lecturing at colleges, and there's a lot more people that want to get into TV and they want to be showrunners. They don't want to be filmmakers, or they don't, they want to be showrunners, not directors. And the
That's
kind of
interesting.
the cultural primacy is starting to move more to TV and streaming, but it may be starting to swing back, um so we'll see what happens with that, but at the same time there then there's other young people that are just doing TikToks that don't even think of themselves as filmmakers, even though they may actually be making perfectly festival level content, but they don't, they think of themselves as content creators or influencers or something. They don't think of themselves as filmmakers, but meanwhile there's a billion people out there making films every day. So I think that's the interesting thing, that I think festivals and film schools and theaters need to really reach out to that generation and go, hey, guess what, you are making films, you are a filmmaker, you are a director, keep doing it, and there are festivals for you and careers for you and things like that. It's not
Got to
just
do it before the AI takes over those
yeah,
spots.
exactly. That's only a matter of time.
I guess it is. That they have writers now. I mean, they write stories. And they're better than half the writers out there, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, no, it's gonna put me out to pasture. um
So, so how many films have you made now? Six, is it?
yeah, about six features, yeah, give or take.
So, you got the seven feature itch coming up.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got at least one more still in me, but it's it's stressful making them. So
I saw
it's
you
not
had
easy.
a lot of Mirvishes in the credits.
Yeah. Well, that's the next generation. I mean, especially during COVID, we were in post-production. There was one period where there was another lockdown for Corona. I don't know which variant it was, but I had the reel-to-reel tape, a player at my house, so I needed I couldn't get my cinematographer. We couldn't be in the same room together. So I just filmed a lot of the insert shots, like the super extreme close-ups of the reel-to-reel player, with my kids helping me in the garage, and then my wife doing some voiceover, and my other daughter helped build props. And so yeah, it's always this is why you have a lot of kids, is so that you can put them to
That's
work.
the old rule. Yeah, the old days.
I learned that from Robert Altman. That's why he had so many kids.
Did he?
Yep.
I didn't know.
Yeah, they all worked on his films.
Any of them turn into filmmakers?
Yeah, almost all of them, one way or the other. Yeah,
Do you
one's a
think that's
cinematographer, one's a production designer, but yeah, they all, his grandson is one of my producing partners, Dana, and so yeah, no, he put them all to work.
how about the Mirvishes? I mean, where are they going? The
I don't
kids.
know. I don't think so far. I don't think any of them are going to go into the business, but you never know. So well, still
Maybe
too
they'll
early
go
to
to
say.
law school and do rights or something.
Yeah, maybe we'll
At
see.
least they'll make a decent living that way.
Yeah.
Do you think filmmakers are starting to make a little better money in terms of sustaining themselves? Well, I guess if they have television, that makes a
If
difference.
they're doing TV, they are. Um, but even then, the bottom's starting to fall out of TV work, so it's not quite as sustainable as people thought it was. Mainly because the streamers aren't paying residuals. And so all the money that people thought, oh, well, okay, pay me less up front, but I'll make money on residuals. And streamers are like, nope, we're not paying you then either. So that's leading to a lot of union issues, which could wind up being a writer's strike and then maybe a director's strike coming up behind it.
It could be a big deal. I mean, they always were opaque when they used to pay on amount of attention to the films or whatever, but they never gave any uh, uh, logistical numbers that you could go off of. It was you just had
Yeah,
a
exactly.
that hasn't improved very much, has it?
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. So it may take a strike to get everyone's attention to get them to cave on that.
Yeah, but they don't have the residuals either, the old stuff to back up with.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a DIY kind of thing too, where people would be selling their own films out and all that. That was supposed to break away from, but I got a feeling that with so many different outlets, that's kind of not as much of a good path anymore. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think our model on 18 and a half was pretty good, where we worked with distributors. We never like technically self-distributed the film. We had distributors, but we divvied up the rights. So the airline rights, we worked with one distributor who's just specializes in airline rights. Theatrical, we had one distributor that was just theatrical. We had one company out of London that's doing the foreign sales, but also did our deal with Stars because it's playing on Stars now. And then another company that's doing DVD. And I think that gave us a lot more control over all those different areas in a way that that so far has worked out pretty well for us.
I do remember, um, not to tap me on that. I remember once getting up at Slamdance and telling people with their DVDs not to sell those rights and just give them off. It was at the beginning of DVD.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and people looked at me with blank stares.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of my more infamous deals was with Omaha the movie when DVDs were just coming out in like 2000 or 2001. I made a deal that somehow got 300,000 copies of Omaha the movie shoved into every Pioneer DVD box sold in North America during a 3-month period. So a third of it as like the sample disc that you would get to show you how a DVD player worked. And
Oh,
so a third of a million people got my first movie, whether they wanted it or not.
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, it was pretty wild, but it was one way to get a movie out there. It's just force it out there. It's kind of like U2 on the podcast when they just kind of forced their song on everyone's iPhones at one point.
so, what do you think about the growth of podcasting?
I think that's interesting. Yeah, it's funny how, I mean, audio dramas and audio productions are coming back. It's like we're in the 1930s again. But it's great. I mean, I've got a couple friends that have been doing, fictional dramatized podcasts, and I think there's an expanded space for that. And that's a great medium to play with, and it's a lot cheaper than having to make a film. You can literally, again, do the entire production over Zoom with a bunch of actors. So I think there's a lot of great space for that. And look, it's been great for my team. I mean, Luis, my composer, he makes most of his money doing music for some pretty high-end podcasts for like Malcolm Gladwell and
Yeah, he's
Freakonomics.
big in podcasting,
Yeah,
Gladwell.
yeah. And so that's been great because that pays his bills, and then he can work on my films and I don't have to pay him as much. So
That makes sense. How did you get into doing the book on
that was
filmmaking book?
I'd been thinking about it for a while, and I'd been writing a bunch of articles mainly for Filmmaker magazine, but for a few other places. And then I realized I had sort of enough critical mass that I had about half a book of just articles that I could repurpose. And then I pitched it to Focal Press, and they said yes right
Great
away.
company.
And yeah, and then now we're into our second edition, and the first edition just got translated into Chinese. It's going to be used at the Beijing Film School, which is pretty impressive. And then I did an audiobook last year, and so that's available. That's actually I bought this mic just for that, to put that
That's
together.
quite a mic.
Yeah. So it's been good, and it kind of gave me this academic credibility to then go and I've taught at 50 film schools around the country, or around the world actually. So that's been good to kind of give me that sort of academic kind of sideways in. I
All
just
right,
did
we
a
got
whole
10 seconds.
yeah. That's it. That's it for me.
Okay, so much for this. But is it possible that I could call you for 5 minutes more questions for audio only?
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It
Okay.
says on here we've got 2.5 minutes left.
It just where early is well I think maybe we did start a little late,
Yeah.
but I actually wanted to do those questions on audio
Okay.
so I could when it comes down to editing I wouldn't have to worry uh
Sure.
because they're going to come out of the blue kind of questions and for the writing up of this.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think we covered the ground. I mean, it's
Yeah,
that's
thank
quite
you.
it was interesting though. I'm looking at the trailer, which led me to find out about your book because the book was after the trailer.
Right.
Was you saw them playing with the tape and all that, the shot of Curtis Von Dion and his cohort there, and it's just going over, and it looks so weird, and then you get in the movie and you say, oh, that's not, well, that was just like kind of cut for the trailer, and then the same thing kind of happens in a different way afterwards. So the trailer represents a feeling, but the actual thing that happened uh, was a kind of the result of what you first thought the trailer was showing, and then you thought,
Right.
no, it wasn't showing you that because they're just having dinner together.
Yeah. No, it's fun. I mean, I cut the trailer too, so it's fun to play around with expectations and tonal changes and what do people think the movie is versus what it actually is, and then yeah, but I just wanted to make a movie that kept surprising people, and because I think that's one of the hardest things to do, and if we can do that, then that's at least we keep them entertained one way or another.
Well,
That's
you
the goal.
edited this yourself. You were the
Yeah,
editor.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what editing system did you work with on this?
Premiere.
Ah, okay. So
Yeah.
that's replaced Final Cut, and now I tried to get Final Cut, and they told me no, go for Black Magic DaVinci Resolve. So
Yeah, that's the hot new one. Yeah. All
that's what
right. So
I'm.
you're gonna call me on my phone?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay. All
All
right.
right.
Goodbye for now
Thanks.
on
All right.
Zoom.
Great. Bye.
All right. Just X out of it.